So here we are inside Miro. Let's do the same initial refresh and see how much data is transferred. Well, it looks like it's really little, 800 kilobytes. Let's do that one more time, just to ensure I made a mistake. Nope, it's really little. So Miro transfers about 800 kilobytes. I think Mural transfers about 4 megabytes or something like that. So the initial load, Miro does a really good job. Interesting fact: if we disable the cache, we see a very different result. But again, that is not something that we see on browsers, so it doesn't really matter. It's just like a nerd thing that I did because I like to kind of look into that stuff. But it seems like there's a lot of things that the Miro caches in that initial. So whatever they do a really good job. Now let's move the same pictures onto this board and see what happens. So here they are. So we have that little progress bar, and again, there's no throttling enabled, in case you're wondering. So right off the bat, maybe it's a little bit slower, just like it's just so much. And you notice they do this effect that Mural didn't seem to do. But yeah, all in all, they're here, and let's do a refresh. And the 15, so we get now 15 megabytes transferred. So that's probably, that has to do with the image being uploaded. So let's do a browser refresh and also flushing the cache. So yeah, it looks like we now get 15 megabytes right off the bat. Not quite sure where that came from, given that the two images are 5 meg all up. So we went from 800 kilobytes to 17. If we do a refresh with the cache, whoa, that's a surprise. So 15 meg transferred. So it looks like even though we are caching, we have the cache enabled, that data is still transferred. Hence the little effect that we see. And in fact, maybe later I'll show like a board that I used with Miro a few years ago now, a couple of years ago, where I accidentally brought in images that were about this size, sketches that I took on my digital, that I took digitally, and I made a mistake of importing them on a larger size, and that was what was happening. Basically, this loading, there was that loading screen that we saw at the beginning was happening on some of the people that I was working with, which was not ideal. So we'll actually simulate that with throttling the connection in a few moments. But first, let's make sure that I'm not going crazy. So I'm going to delete those images, do a refresh. And yeah, I'm not going crazy. It's 800 kilobytes. So what happens, Miro? I don't know what's happening, but okay. So next up, I want to check what does this look like on a visitor's computer. So let's open up a visitor. Let's open up again our network tab and then hit this, and let's see. So we should get those same 15 meg probably. Let's start 7 meg, and yeah. So there you see that little loading screen showing up, and this is so I'm going at 40 megabits per second download and 20 megabits per second upload. So this connection is fairly quick, I want to say. But yeah, we saw that little loading screen. Next, I want to throttle this connection and see what happens on this side. So I'm gonna basically leave the two side by side, skip completely, and see what happens. So let's throttle to an ADSL line, and let's do a refresh that flushes the cache. How long is it gonna take? We know it has to transfer 15 15 megabytes of data. So with this line, that's gonna take maybe a little bit longer, but here it is. Actually transferred to, wow, look at this. This is so interesting. So it decompressed to 19. So there is some compression happening here. So I don't know what they do, but that's pretty good. So let's do another test just to make sure that we're not going crazy. So even though those two images were 5 meg, we do not get that transferred over. It gets compressed. That's excellent work on their side. So they do that pixelated thing. We see that it's doing that loading. So I think what's happening, and actually is we get that speed at that zooming level, which is 20%. When we zoom in, it's actually starting to render at a higher resolution. So that's something to keep in mind. So probably what was happening with the other connection, we got the 15 meg straight away because the connection was fast enough. With this connection that is lower, they basically just send down a preview, which is fine, and then it kind of loads as you need it. Like in this case, you can see doesn't have capacity to load it. It's loading the other one, and it seems like it's bugging reloading. This is the issue I had with my sketch notes. So Mural is doing a much more they invest in the first load, so they have that blank screen. Here I feel that if we reload it, it loads much faster than Mural, and so your person will be able to start contributing, which maybe is the important bit, right? I can start adding post-it notes. This is slow, but you can add stuff. So yeah, that's the important bit. So it takes definitely that trade-off. So something to keep in mind. Again, those images are very large. I do not advise you to use multi-megabyte backgrounds like this. But sometimes people do that, and if you test it on a faster line, you won't even notice that slowness. Or maybe they don't think about it. So this is how to basically simulate what your potential users might see and address that beforehand. So you can prepare for that scenario if you follow these tips. So we've seen that this thing will probably go on for a little while. Let's try and maybe upload some elements, kind of to see the caching thing that we saw on the other side. Actually, I'm gonna let this load. So it looks like if you stay completely still, that loading works out fine. I wonder if someone else moves stuff. Does that create interference? No, it doesn't. That's good. What if I move it? I kind of want to move it. You have to reload it. Oh well. Oh, look at this. Perfect. So it just did it in the background. Oh no, now the other one restarted. So now that we have this sorted out, I want to do the same test we did in Mural with the trees. What happens if we start bringing in some trees? So again, this is not throttled. This image is 600 kilobytes. Again, maybe a little bit big. We could make it, but we could use something smaller. What I'm curious about is what happens when we start, first of all, duplicating this stuff. It looks like, I mean, on the other side, look, this is happening pretty much in real time. So it's not really affecting. It is not really affected by this lower speed. What I'm curious to see is about the reload time. So first, let's do it on the faster network where bloop, stuff just comes in. And again, it's because they're cached, it doesn't matter if you have like 5, 10 or a few more. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna, well, first reload on this lower internet connection and see how having multiple trees impacts it. And it's pretty good. So one gets rendered and then they're cached. So it doesn't matter how many you have. We're gonna do this over there just to add a few more and see if we have 20 meg of resources. Let's see if we reload. We're still around 19 meg as we were. Yeah, looks like we are. So yeah, this is something to keep in mind. Let's refresh it on this lower internet connection one more time, just to see what we get. And again, one is refresh, one is downloaded, everything else comes in. So kudos on the folks on the engineers on the Miro side for being able to handle it this way. So where does this leave us? The Miro and Mural are fairly similar in terms of like performance. We just have that initial hit in Mural. We of course want to do a little bit of like analysis before we create those large boards to see how much data we use. Maybe pick backgrounds that are a little bit smaller. Like for example, I'm drawing one now just as an example, which is 600 kilobytes. So maybe I use something like around that size instead of the large images that I brought in, and I just brought in something that was large as an example, not because I recommend you to do that. So yeah, this is how Miro handles data transfers, and yeah, here we are. And another thing I want to show you, this is like an actual open space that I've run. I've already duplicated a lot of those trees, and that was just like an example of what we saw, but in a different context, in a different board. The caching mechanism takes care of refreshing and repositioning all those. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. On this board there was no image, by the way. All we had was, you see those that were a little bit more blurred, they were an image, so I tried to do that instead of the single trees. Doesn't seem to be any benefit. Actually, it's worse, because it seems like a larger, blurrier version rather than having the regular trees. So yeah, well done, Miro.